How to spot fake social media profiles, especially as we get ready for general elections 2025. This morning, we asked that question to publicist and communications advisor, Mr. Ian Royer, who joins us via Zoom. Good morning to you, Ian.
Good morning. How are you doing?
So far, so good. How are you?
Good, good. I'm calling from Toronto, so it's a bit colder here than it is in Trinidad.
Well, I appreciate you waking up this early to join us and to help share some information this morning. Tell me, let's start off with the most generic of the questions in terms of how do we identify a fake social media profile?
Well, first of all, you look for inconsistencies, like a generic profile photo, and these days AI. It may look real, but there's always something a little bit off with the profile picture. Also, you look for new accounts that were created and have minimal content. When you scroll through, you'll see them being made within the last month or two. Also, they have vague bios and an unusual posting rhythm. So, fake accounts often avoid engaging with personal people. They don't share much about themselves, and they focus heavily on just political narratives and political messaging. And then for Facebook pages, you want to look at the About section, which has a transparency section, which is new. And that tells you where the admins are located. So you may see that they may not even be in Trinidad. And it also tells you if they're running ads, and that's also a telltale sign that it's a political account.
All right. So tell me something, Ian. How do these profiles pose a threat to our democracy or to the election campaign or anything like that? Because I mean, if you make a fake profile, how does that influence the election?
Well, the thing with social media is that it's ran by a logarithm, so it pushes things that you want to see. And these accounts tend to generate information that is intended to be inflammatory, to make you feel something, to make you feel negative, and make you inclined to share it so that you
Hmm.
echo those sentiments and those feelings to your own audience. So it's really piggybacking off of your feelings and your audience to get a negative message across that can inflame social discourse around narratives that may or may not be true. And so a few coordinated profiles can make a large reach of people with misinformation. And we're seeing that in geopolitics right now, that misinformation is the biggest threat to democracy. And people are finding out after they vote that that misinformation led them to vote in the incorrect way or in a way that's against their own interest.
Hmm. And that could be very, very interesting. Now, we saw an example of something resembling that would have been in the 2010 election, if I'm not mistaken, with the Cambridge Analytica story that came out after, where they said that Trinidad and Tobago was one of the test subjects in that regard. Is that similar to what we're talking about in terms of creating those fake profiles to be able to have that narrative going?
Well, yes, it is, but the difference is that the algorithm has become a lot smarter. And so it's way easier to get viral moments than it was 10 years ago
Mm.
with information. And now there is fact checking is gone. So now even the apps themselves are no longer moderating content to see if there's accuracy. And so it's even more dangerous now, I would say, because it's easier to get a viral moment of misinformation than it
Hmm.
was 10 years ago. And the tools are smarter. So it's targeting people based on what they say and what they post to just stroke that emotion and that feeling with things that may not necessarily be true.
How do we navigate that as social media users?
Well, if you're old enough to have done general paper at A levels, you know that you need to always check your sources, right? Nothing changes with social media.
Right.
It might be even easier for you to do that. So always double check. Check with all of the news houses. Do some fact checking. Generally, if the message is highly emotional, you might want to just check it out because you could kind of feel that something is playing with your emotions to make you share. We call it rage bait is the new term right now, where it gets you so feeling so agitated that you don't fact check. You just share
Mm.
because of that emotional instance. So just take a moment to step back and to verify that what is being said is actually true and ask questions. If the page doesn't engage with you and you ask questions, chances are it's not real.
Okay, that's one kind of clear-cut way that we can approach it. You try to ask a question. If you do get a response, you give a time frame for that response. So if you say like after 3 days you do get a response, then as a fake page.
It doesn't change from how you interact with real pages. Most people will respond to you and cite their sources. I think there was some narratives happening this weekend, and in instant time, people were like, "Is this real?" And then people came back and were like, "Yeah, this is real." And so that discourse happened instantaneously. Fake profiles are not here to engage with you; they're here to just share and kind of like a hit and run.
Right.
So when there's a lack of engagement that comes from the page itself, it's kind of suspicious.
Okay. Are there any other patterns that we should be looking for besides the not answering immediately or at all in some cases?
Yeah, you want to look at some of the hashtags that people are using, some of the language may be robotic. In the world of I think what is interesting is that vernacular and slang is hard to imitate,
Integrate.
but they'll try.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, if they're only posting political content for a month and they're not even posting their auntie, tanty, dog, or friend, something's kind of wrong there.
Mm-hmm.
And so also look out for parroting of foreign ideas, because what they will do is try to use what has been done in other elections to kind of hit home. Trinidad is really a unique place, a unique culture, so it doesn't always ring true. Again, it's more about using common sense in these times, and we
Mm-hmm.
have those skills built into us from school. It doesn't change.
Well, some of us do. I don't know that everybody does. In some cases, that power of discernment seems to be a little bit lacking. However, what I did want to find out is, like, for me, I'm okay ignoring it, right? Like, if I see a page and it seems to be fake, I just ignore it and I move on with my life. I don't give it the engagement that they're looking for. I don't take it on. I just press on. Is there any danger with doing that? With just ignoring it?
I don't think that there's danger in ignoring it, but being aware at the upfront of the election like this, that this is something and a tactic that is happening, will help the electoral system. These pages trying to break trust in the electoral system, in our partisan approach to politics. Um, so when people can't distinguish the difference between truth and manipulation and they disengage, it weakens our democracy. Like, I think the best thing to do is to have discussion with your friends and your family members and your community, just to make sure that what you are seeing is true. And also to have that discussion with your elected officials and people seeking your vote. Use this as an opportunity to talk to them. I think we're losing that art of discussing things with the people that you're electing, and taking things at face value. And you can't do that now. You couldn't do it 10 years ago or 15 years ago before social media. So why aren't you talking to your representatives to make sure that their ideologies match yours and that they're meeting your needs and the needs of the constituency? And so when you disengagement is another form of voter suppression and disengaging the electorate. You're going to hear a lot of noise, but it's up to you and it's up to your community to cut through the noise. I think I had a mentor recently say to me that sometimes you need to listen to the signal and not the noise, and we
Mm.
should know what that is as a people that love soca and music. You're not going to listen to the noise on Carnival Monday and Tuesday. So why are you doing that for the election?
I think sometimes it might be a little bit easier to discern in terms of the music versus versus the election campaign, and oftentimes people get caught in the he say she say, and they never know which one is true, and sometimes it feels difficult for persons to do that fact checking, that research that you're talking about. Tell me about the benefits to the people who creating these fake profiles. What are the benefits of doing that to them? I know you
I mean, they
mentioned
get paid.
sowing seeds of discord, right? But how do those seeds of discord, what do they grow into? What do they grow into to be able to benefit anybody?
I think when you look at the political landscape of Trinidad and Tobago, you need swing voters to earn your seat in certain constituencies, and I definitely think that this is an election where it's going to come down to those not sure seats as to who will form the government. And so, by creating that discord specifically in seats where neither party is sure, there is intrinsic benefit to making voters doubt one way or the other or not participate in the elections because they're fatigued by the
Mm,
messaging. Because then it just comes up to chance as to how many people voted and how many people took your message versus the truth.
right. Okay. I get it. I get it. Very interesting times ahead, and I want to advise everybody to just be aware, like you said, do the research, do the fact checking, ask the questions in those cases. Are there any specific social media places? So, for example, is it primarily on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter? Where do we see the majority of these fake profiles existing? At least as far as our Trinidad and Tobago elections are concerned.
Yeah, I think that Facebook and Twitter are generally big platforms for Trinidad and Tobago. We're slowly opening into TikTok, and TikTok is having more of a presence as people are connecting a lot more with video. Twitter by far is the easiest place to create fake profiles and to spin narratives with them. And we're still a Facebook community. Instagram, not so much. It's hard to do that there because it's all picture based. So generally, Facebook, Twitter, and I would say TikTok are the primary platforms for these types of tactics.
Nice. All right. So it's just a matter of us being aware and double checking, triple checking, and making sure that the information that we're sharing is actually accurate. How do we navigate when, for example, the local newspapers or media houses run with some of this information, be it real or fake? How do we navigate that as well? Because we've seen times in the past where people ran with fake information, and we had to come back and say, well, no, sorry, that wasn't true. If it is that as a trusted media house, you're running fake information, how does the public navigate that as well?
Well, the public has to demand trust and honesty in this election campaign, not just from their elected officials, but from media houses. Media plays a huge part in protecting democracy, and we have to demand that they do so with integrity and accuracy. And I think that's part of journalism. When you become a journalist, there's an unspoken contract that you do your research before you bring the news to people, or else it's hearsay.
Mhm.
And so your voice becomes just as important now, or more important now, in what you demand and what you accept from these trusted partners during the election campaign and beyond.
And tell me a little bit about the distractions, right? You mentioned being distracted by the fake profiles. Sometimes we have situations where distractions come in the form of old stories. So you might hear a story from, 15, 30 years ago, as the case may be. How do we navigate those things to pay attention to, like you mentioned, discussing the facts and the issues on the table with your elected officials or the persons running for office versus something that may have happened some time ago that may not be relevant to the situation at hand?
Yeah, I think this election is extremely critical that we return to grassroots forms of communication and going and showing up at political rallies, showing up and speaking to your constituents and people who are running for prime minister when they come to see you and asking those questions. Um, Everybody has a voice on social media, and that's what makes the noise so great. But we still have the opportunity to go to your constituents' offices, to go to ask questions of the people who are seeking your vote. And I think also the onus is on the politician to clarify things when things like this come into the public domain sooner rather than later. It's not going to go away. Um, this isn't 20 years ago where something disappears. There's a record of it for the rest of your life.
All right.
And so they have a duty to the public to clarify their position. And there also needs to be some sort of critical assessment, who I was when I was 16 is not the man that I am today at 40. And no one can say that they're the same. If they're staying the same as they were in childhood, something is wrong. And so there is also some grace that we need to have. At the end of the day, we're electing human beings, and human beings make mistakes. I think asking questions more so about what is their politics now and how have
Yeah.
they shifted their mindset from what they did or said in the past that makes them worthy of your vote is important. And I think that we have to approach politics with empathy. We've sort of lost empathy, being able to critique people from behind a computer screen rather than face to face. And that's something that we also, as human beings, need to be better at, especially now. It's going to be a tight election. It's only about 6 weeks, so it's going to be crazy.
It
And so
certainly
we
is.
have to navigate this with empathy, but also with some sense. And as a voter, you have to ask people, what are you going to do for me? Here are the problems that I face. Here are the problems my community face. What is your direct plan for that as a constituency and as a country? We forget to ask those two important questions and we lose sight of it. And so when these questions of character come up, you take that into account. I'm not saying you don't take that into account, but it's pushing back on the narrative in the spaces that you have access to. It's all well and good to say, well, I saw this on Facebook, so I don't need to go to the political rally. That doesn't really make sense. You need to know what these people are about before you go to the polls. That's the dance that we play during an election.
Yeah. All right. Well, Ian, thank you so much for joining us this morning and for sharing this information. I hope that our audience is able to take it in and to make the necessary adjustments when they're navigating social media. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. Enjoy the rest of your day.